What's up, guys? Got a somewhat loaded card to look at here today. A lot of options. We had the Monday Night Football game last night. The Vikings actually kind of dominated that game and pretty much led it wire to wire, surprisingly, against the 49ers. Brock Purdy was not Purdy. Threw interceptions on the last two possessions for the 49ers to ice it for the Vikings, although the Vikings did let them hang around, even though the Vikings kind of dominated the game statistically. Unfortunately, I was right about those extra leans that I gave out, pretty much all of them. The Ravens, the Eagles, and 49ers, because I always pretty much lean to by default to like home underdogs in Monday Night Football. All of those were correct, but what are you going to do? My pick'em week was much better than my betting week in the NFL, which sometimes that is the case. I should just bet bet the whole slate, bet every game, basically. What are you going to do? Tonight we got college football. These Tuesday night games, man, and what is this? It's all Conference USA, I think. I don't even know what it is. I think that's what it is. We got New Mexico State at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech's a minus 2.5 point favorite at home. So the odds are telling you that New Mexico State is the better team, but not by much. And there are conflicting signals here, I would say. It looks like the market read would put me on New Mexico State because Louisiana Tech has 56% of the tickets, but 58% of the cash appears to be on the other side on New Mexico State with not that much line movement. But when you just look at these two teams, you see their records, and maybe even if you take into account kind of the name recognition that they have, people are going to look and say, hey, New Mexico State has the better record, but they're the underdog. So, and possibly think that there's like a little bit of value taking New Mexico State, the team with the better record, as an underdog. But Louisiana Tech has a big game up next against Liberty. So I think that's a look ahead to Liberty for Louisiana Tech. I believe that is the case, at least. So that would tend to make me lean New Mexico State in that one. Not strong at all, but the market read and the fact that Louisiana Tech has the look ahead to Liberty, that would kind of land me on New Mexico State there, but very, very weak lean just because of that. But New Mexico State has kind of been rolling 3 wins in a row, and La Tech has lost a couple in a row. That would actually tend to make me want to not be on New Mexico State, but anyway, yeah, those are my feelings on that. There's not that much going on there. There's even less going on in the other game, I would say, with Liberty and Western Kentucky. Liberty is up from a 3.5 point favorite to a 5 point favorite on the road, 5.5, with 67% of the cash, 56% of the tickets. So it looks like there is money driving Liberty up. I think Liberty is certainly the better team. I don't have really much of an angle here. I mean, Liberty's an undefeated team. I don't know if there's much else to say about this, really. I think people might look at this one and tend to think, because people know Western Kentucky somewhat, they know the name, the record is above 500. People might look at this and tend to think that this might be a competitive game, that there's value taking Western Kentucky as the home underdog. Possibly that might be the feeling from like some recreational guys here. I think Liberty is, however, a significantly better team than Western Kentucky. So I would only lean like the Liberty way here. And Western Kentucky is coming off playing the other top team in the conference, really, Jacksonville State, who's been really good this year, even though I've been saying that Jacksonville State has been kind of overrated. But Western Kentucky, I thought Western Kentucky would be able to do it against Jacksonville State. They lost on a last-second field goal, I believe. So that's kind of a dramatic loss there, dramatic finish. So Western Kentucky coming off that, I think that puts them at a little bit of an extra disadvantage as well, even though it's not like they're going to be like unfocused when they have the best team in the conference, the undefeated team in the conference coming in. But having to play 2 tough games like that back-to-back might be a little bit difficult. So yeah, Liberty would be the only way I would look there. That's pretty much it for college football. We have Major League Baseball as probably surprisingly the Texas Rangers, maybe not surprisingly, that Texas won last night to win the AL pennant, but the way that they won, they just blew them out, basically. I think they were up 11-2 in the final innings there and wound up winning 11-4. I don't think we really expected Texas to win in a complete blowout like that, but Texas, their hitting is definitely dangerous. So that's interesting. We have the NLCS Game 7 happening tonight with Arizona and Philadelphia, and this is a rematch of, I think, Game 4 maybe? One of the games in the series between Pfaadt and Ranger Suarez, and I talked about it in that game when they faced off, that both of these guys have bad stats on the season. They might be the worst starters in each of these rotations. Pfaadt, however, has not been seen that much by Philly. They only had 8 at-bats against him. I think they only had 8 at-bats against him going into the prior matchup against him, but he didn't last very long in that game, so now they only have 10 more at-bats against him. I don't know, but Philly is 111 off of him lifetime in only 18 at-bats, so very limited playing time, whereas Suarez has been seen much more by the Arizona hitters, 93 at-bats worth, and they've hit him to the tune of a 247 OBA. So actually, both of these pitchers have done fairly well against these opposing lineups. Suarez, I think, is going to be the pitcher that's going to be tended to be a little bit overvalued here because his ERA is 4.18, which is okay, not bad, but his whip is much higher at 1.42, which is really not good, whereas Pfaadt just has bad stats overall, 5.72 ERA, 1.41 whip, on the season. So people are going to certainly, the public is certainly only going to want to be on Philly here. They know that Philly's the better team, and they're going to consider Suarez to be the better of the two pitchers, and maybe he is, although I don't think it's significantly so. And Pfaadt might have a little bit of an advantage just in that he hasn't been seen before. But actually, I was wrong about what Pfaadt did in the previous game. He actually went 5 2/3, so I think those statistics are not up to date with the number of at-bats that Philly has faced him. So maybe I'm wrong about that. So that might not include that previous game, or at least all of it. But Pfaadt in that game, the Arizona won that game. I think they won it later in the game, 2-1. Pfaadt went 5 2/3 and only gave up 2 hits, no walks, and 9 strikeouts. So he did really well in that game. But I think now that Philly has seen him a little bit more, I don't expect him to do quite as well in this game, I wouldn't say. And Suarez actually did better than expected in that game as well. Even though they wound up losing the game late, he also didn't allow any runs. I think the game was scoreless into the 6th or 7th inning. He went 5 1/3, only gave up 3 hits, 7 strikeouts, and 1 walk. So they both did surprisingly well. I would kind of expect them both to regress a little bit in this game. I don't have that much of a lean on the side here at all, really, but Philly's up from -155 to -170 on the money line, 89% of the cash, but 69% of the tickets. So it does look like the money is driving Philadelphia up here. I think Philly, I don't know if you're going to be able to, especially with the money line way up like this, I don't know that there's going to be much value to be had on the Philadelphia side here because everybody knows they're the somewhat better team anyway, so probably there isn't value looking there at that side. What I do see is that the total has gone down from 8.5, over 8.5 -120 to under 8.5 -120, and it looks like the over has 55% of the tickets, but the under has 54% of the cash. So it does look like there's money on the under. And I know I said that in the ALCS Game 7, and that game went way over, although most of it was just Houston. Houston's pitching just got rocked yesterday. That was kind of the main factor in that one. In this one, even though I expect these two pitchers to regress a little bit, my lean would still tend to be towards the under here, just because this is a Game 7, kind of like what I said yesterday, but it is different in baseball than it is in the other sports, where you don't have teams getting really focused and being able to play lockdown defense, because too much of it hinges on the pitchers, and neither of these pitchers are actually that good. And even though they both did well in their previous starts, I would expect them to, like I said, not do quite as well here, even though I would still slightly lean to the under because it's Game 7 and the way the market is looking here. If you can get under 8.5 at like minus 110, I would slightly lean that way, but not strongly. In this game, the previous game did actually go under the total with a Arizona 5-1 win, so 6 total runs there. Don't have anything strong on this one, but that's pretty much what I can say about that. In the NHL, we have a full slate. I'm going to have one NHL play and one NBA play, and close to a couple other playable games in the NHL, I would say. There's a full slate here, so I'm not going to like totally break down every one of these games, but like I look at the overall market and read the market kind of first sometimes to see like where there's like these cash versus ticket discrepancies and see like, do I agree with it? One of the ones I first noticed is the Colorado Avalanche at the New York Islanders. Colorado's only a minus 132 money line on the road, which has gone down from minus 138. And it looks like 90% of the tickets are on Colorado, but 52% of the cash on the other side on the Islanders. So I'm going to lean to the Islanders in this one, even though I don't think it's the strongest play on the board. Colorado's an undefeated team, and they did just beat Carolina, which is somewhat of a big win, even though Carolina, they might be slightly down this year. I don't know. They're 3-3 to start the season, but that's somewhat of a big win. And Colorado won back-to-back games at home, and now they have to go on the road, and they've had 2 days off. Starting a road trip does tend to be a positive spot, which is one of the reasons I'm staying off of Colorado. But I think when you just won 2 games at home and then you start a road trip, it could tend to be a little bit disruptive, because when you're winning at home and things are going smoothly, you don't really want to disrupt that momentum and have to go on the road. So I actually think that starting a road trip in this case is actually more of a negative than a positive, even though it usually can be a positive. They've had a couple days off after that, but they're coming off the big win over Carolina, who's at the very least a team that's known as being like there. Like Carolina was one of the best teams in hockey last year. They're still a good team, even though they're 3-3 so far this year. They have to go out, play the Islanders here, and then they have Pittsburgh next. And Pittsburgh's always like kind of a big team, big in name at least. So it is possible that this is a down spot in Colorado's schedule and that they might overlook the Islanders a little bit. The Islanders have kind of stayed like close to home recently, and they've lost 2 games in a row to the Devils, which was a tough game. And then I went against the Islanders in the next game when they had to play the very next day. They went out to Buffalo and they were hung over coming off that Devils overtime loss, that close loss. So I won that play on the Sabres, and now after that the Islanders come back home. The very short trip back home here. So I think the Islanders are in like a bounce back spot and a plus spot, and Colorado's kind of in a letdown, like maybe you could even call it a sandwich type of spot there. So I would only look to the Islanders there. And of course, the public is going to be on Colorado. They're the undefeated team. Everybody knows they're the better team. It's kind of a short money line price to lay there. Lean would be to the Islanders in that one. I also lean against my own Boston Bruins. They have a big money line. They've actually gone up from minus 220 to minus 228 on the road with 65% of the tickets on Boston, but 52% of the cash on the other side on the Chicago Blackhawks. And this is a spot where it is a quick in-season revenge spot, which I don't put much into revenge at all, but when you did just play this team like a week ago, basically, or a little bit over a week ago, that tends to be a little bit more of a motivating factor for the team that lost. And I think it makes the team that won like slightly complacent, maybe, even though maybe not in this case, because that was in Boston, and the Bruins actually kind of struggled in that game. That was the opening game of the season. And even though the Bruins won 3-1, they got an empty netter near the end. So they were really only winning that game by 1 goal for a lot of the game. So it could go both ways. I could see it there. But the spot I don't think is that good for the Bruins, because they did just go out to the West Coast. Like Colorado, they are another undefeated team. They might be the only 2 undefeated teams left in hockey. I'm not totally sure about that. But they're coming back from the West Coast and having to play in Chicago, I think, before they return home. So that's a little bit of a weird travel spot that I don't particularly like, because it's almost like you just went out to the West Coast and had a nice like road trip out there. I think yeah, and then you kind of come, and then it's like almost like a half return home, almost where you come back and you have to stop in the Midwest and play a team you already beat before you come home. It's a little bit of an odd spot there for Boston, I would say. And with Chicago, they're in a spot where they started out. Well, what did they do? Yeah, actually, yeah, their last game, yeah, they started out, they were 2-2, which looked pretty good, and now they've dropped two in a row, but it was to the Avalanche on the road, and then Chicago was actually, they're actually in a decent spot here, I would say. I think, yeah, this is actually not a bad spot. Like, it's tempting to play Chicago here because they actually started with 5 straight road games to start the season, which is really brutal. That's a really tough way to start the season. Then they came home off of loss to the Avalanche, even though they got blown out by the Avalanche. The Avs are one of the best teams in hockey. They had to return home, which returning home is a bad spot in and of itself. They had to face the Vegas Knights, the returning champions in that one, and then they played that one a little bit tougher and lost that one in the end as well. So that's, yeah, those are 2 tough games, so I don't fault Chicago for losing those games. But now they had that return home and lost that game. Once you have that return home, that tends to be like a negative spot because you tend to be a little bit unfocused. Although when it's a good team like the Knights coming in, you probably do still have that focus there, which is the one thing that might like want to keep me off of Chicago here because they are coming off of those 2 big games, but then again the Bruins are also a big opponent, but it's still kind of brutal to have to play those 3 games in a row. But when a team returns home, they don't have a great game in that first game returning home. It tends to be a much better spot in that second game as like a bounce back. They've gotten like all the like distractions from returning home out of the way. They've dealt with that now. Now they're at home. They came off that kind of ugly game. Now they're ready to focus on hockey again and bounce back. So the second game on the return home, just in general, if you lose the first game when you come back home, tends to be a more positive spot. And that's the spot that Chicago's in here. So I think most of it is positive for Chicago. If I were to look here, I think you would still have to play the big like Chicago money line at plus 192 or whatever you might be able to get, plus 180s, plus 190s. With a money line this big, I would tend to want to look at the puck line. If it's around like minus 120 or better, but it looks like it's like minus 135 on the Chicago puck line right now. So I would hold off on that. If you can get the puck line on Chicago at like minus 120 or better than that at some point throughout the day, like I might look that way in this one. But I would only lean to Chicago and I would only lean to the Islanders. Those are 2 somewhat strong leans. But the game I'm actually going to be playing, the market actually doesn't look as good on the game I'm going to actually be playing. But I think the situation is quite good. I'm playing the New York Rangers, and they are up from minus 110 to minus 125, even though it looks like they have 78% of the cash, but only 64% of the tickets on them, because I think they're kind of a public team. People know the Rangers are a better team. This is at Calgary. People know the Rangers are a pretty good team. Unfortunately, it means playing the public team here. So I don't like that. I tend to not like going against the market here, but I think the situation kind of dictates this. This is probably the worst spot that I see a team in on the NHL slate today. So that's why I'm doing this. So even though we know that the Rangers are the better team, the line is telling you that they are the better team. And even though it looks like there is that ticket cash discrepancy there, which I don't like, it does look like some of the bigger money has driven the Rangers up a little bit as well. So it looks like there is some agreement with me at least. But this is a play against Calgary. Finally, I'm going against Calgary. I've lost too many times on them. I've lost, I think, at least twice on them, which is not good. But what do we have with Calgary here? They started the season at home, won at home against the Jets. Then they played 5 straight road games and had a brutal road trip going 1-4. So I think the tendency, well, maybe not in this case just because the public probably likes the Rangers a little bit more, but one of the tendencies from recreational bettors is going to look and be like, well, this team just had a brutal road trip. They just ended that with like a couple ugly losses, like a bad loss. Although in this case, Calgary lost at the Red Wings, even though I thought the Red Wings were in a bad spot in that game. I think I lost on that one. that's the Red Wings are off to a really good start. They're a hot team, 5-1, so that's also kind of a tough game to be coming off of. But I think the tendency for recreational bettors might be to look at a team and be like, well, they just had a brutal road trip. Now they're going to return home, and that's going to result in like a bounce back. They're going to play better. But like I said, that tends to be the opposite of the case. When you're a team and you have this long road trip, and their road trip took them like way out east, like Midwest, and then as far east as Buffalo, I believe. When you have a long road trip like that and you have to return home, in this case to Western Canada, with, I believe, 1 day off, I think is what they have in this case, maybe 2. Let me look. It tends to be only a negative spot, really, for a team when they're in a situation like that, because they have the distractions of home. They have to return back home. And even though with a team like the Rangers, that might tend to focus you a little bit because they're a pretty good team, and they're a team that has name recognition at least. But yeah, 1 day off for Calgary and a long road trip that they're returning from, I do think that tends to be a very negative spot, almost entirely. So that's the spot that they're in there. And then for the Rangers, they've had 2 days off, so they're in a better rest position. Calgary's is a little bit worse even because they've had only 1 day off, but they're also playing a 4th game in 6 days, I believe, which is a pretty brutal spot to be in. So they're not a very rested team here, even though that's factored into the line, I would assume. The Rangers are the more rested team. The Rangers actually have 2 good goaltenders as well, and it looks like their primary goaltender, Shesterkin, is going to be back in net for this one because he played the first 4 games. Then they used Jonathan Quick, who everybody knows, who's actually their second goalie. They used him in their last game, which was a nice win over Seattle. Had a bunch of days off, and now I would expect probably Shesterkin is going to be back in net on this one. So the Rangers have the extra rest. They're set up nicely, and they just started a road trip against Seattle. So that was probably a positive spot for them because they had lost pretty badly to Nashville in the previous game. So starting that road trip is a positive spot for the Rangers. But I don't think like coming off Seattle was like a letdown spot or anything like that. Like, plus now they've been able to kind of adjust to that time zone out there, even though I think they're going maybe from Pacific to Mountain time for this one, but they've been able to adjust to the time zone difference still. And now the extra day to focus here. So I like the Rangers for all those reasons. I think it's a very bad spot for Calgary having to return back home with short rest, having played more games, 1 more game than the Rangers have since the 16th. So it looks like a bad spot for Calgary, even though the market doesn't look great for this one. I like the New York Rangers. I laid minus 120. I think you'd still get something in that range on the New York Rangers on the road. Sort of almost just playing them. Well, of course, you're playing them to win the game because it's the money line, but it's almost like a minus 110 money line situation. They're not too much above that. So even though 120's, I guess, somewhat significantly different from 110, where you're playing the money lines in hockey like this, it feels like there's a little bit less of a difference there. And we have NBA, and I'm also going to have an NBA play here as well, even though it looks like the market has shifted a little bit, which is not great, I guess. But I think I still like it here. We have 2 pretty big matchups here to kick off the NBA. One of them is Suns-Warriors, which I'll talk about first. And it looks like the Warriors are only a 1.5 point favorite at home. It looks like it's dropping a little bit. And it looks like the Suns have 51% of the cash, but 54% of the tickets are on the Warriors. Both of these teams, I think, tend to be a little bit public. They both have big names on the teams, of course, but the Warriors tend to be a bit of the more public team, I would say, out of the 2 of them. But people saw both of these teams were in the playoffs last year. Everybody knows both of these teams. But the line is really telling you that the Suns are actually the better team here because the Warriors have the short line at home, so they're not even getting the full home court advantage here. And it looks like the money is kind of moving the number towards the Suns. I don't really have much of a situational there isn't much to say situationally here, but it looks like the lean would be a little bit towards the Suns on this one. The game that I am playing, unfortunately, it looks like the money has shifted a little bit, which is Lakers-Nuggets. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is a rematch of the Western Conference Finals last year that everybody saw, and it looks like the Nuggets are actually up to a 6-point favorite now at home, even though it looks like 63% of the tickets, but only 60% of the cash are on the Lakers now. But when I just looked at it a little while ago, it looked like the Lakers had more of the cash than the tickets. So I don't know what to think about the ticket cash discrepancy in this one, or the fact that the line has gone up a little bit more on the Nuggets at 6. But this is a situational play here, and I'm on the Lakers +6 here. Even though I think that people, just in a vacuum, they might tend to look at this game, like they might look at it the way that they looked at the playoff series between these two before that series started. People were higher on the Lakers and thought that was going to be like a more competitive series than it wound up being. People liked what they saw throughout the playoffs from the Lakers, but then the Lakers just ran into the Nuggets, and then the Nuggets swept them out of the playoffs completely. The Nuggets just took over that series. But there were games that the Nuggets could have lost in that series for sure. But I think that changes the perception of these two teams now. And this line, I forget what the lines were in that series. I think the Nuggets were a little bit higher of a favorite in that series than they are here, which would actually make me want to actually look at the Nuggets here, because it's like, why are they only like a 6-point favorite now instead of a 7 or whatever it was in that NBA Finals series? Like, what has changed? I mean, the teams have changed slightly since then, but I'm going to throw that out a little bit in this case, and I'm going to look at what the situation is. The Nuggets, of course, are coming off winning the NBA Finals, which I think was the first time that they've won the NBA Finals. So they could be in kind of a hangover spot here, in a spot where they're going to be overvalued because they are the returning champions. They get to bask in all of that, championship goodness, playing at home to start the season, fresh off of winning the NBA title, winning the NBA Finals. And they're playing against the Lakers, who the last time the Lakers played not in the regular season, but in the postseason, what did they do? They got somewhat embarrassed by this Nugget team. They got swept out of the playoffs by the Nuggets. So obviously the Lakers are going to remember that. That was only a few months ago. And the Lakers, who do they get as their next opponent? Right now, they get to face that team once again, the team that just eliminated them and ended their season. So that's going to be a pretty big motivating factor for the Lakers here, in my opinion. If anything, as far as revenge is concerned, matters in a sport like the NBA, it's going to be a situation like this where you're facing the team that ended your season, and not only are you doing that, but you're facing that team the first thing to start this new season. So I'm only going to look to the Lakers here. I think it's kind of that championship hangover letdown spot for the Nuggets, and it's a spot for the Lakers to be motivated here and maybe kind of angry, and they get to face the team that ended their season, and they've probably kind of been thinking about this, knowing that they get to start the season facing the Nuggets again for a while. So I think the Lakers probably have this game circled. And perception-wise, the Nuggets might even have a little bit more of the kind of like false perception on their side if people are weighing the preseason into account, because the Nuggets had an okay preseason and the Lakers preseason was really not good. So if people weigh that in at all, people are going to tend to tend to overvalue the Nuggets a little bit here as well. I like the Lakers. So these two plays here, oh boy. Even though the stronger market reads were in the NHL, and they would be the Islanders and the Chicago Blackhawks, I would say, are the strongest market reads here. But for the situational plays, and I am a situational guy, even though I like to find spots where I get the situation and the market both agreeing with me. And I thought I had it on this one at least, but maybe I don't, even though I guess we'll see as the day progresses. But I'm playing these two, which I think are the strongest situations on the card here to play. The New York Rangers -120 in hockey, and the LA Lakers +6 in the NBA. That's going to do it. I'm Toad. I'm better off dead, baby. This is one of my longest morning videos. It's a big card today. Enjoy all the games. Peace.